Gasat nga bigat ka probinsyaan na dati man iti programa tayo silnagti pagtaingan. So, syempre, another day, another video man yan para iti programa tayo silnagti pagtaingan. Kadwa tayo latay ti technical side tayo ni Ms. Cara Molina and it's me, your kapid, Manuel Tabbay. So, naggasat nga bigat adaman klase no bing Lunes. So, intay man in sumbreken iti klase and of course, it's second week nga. Kasi the first week iti klase, ay yapo, dinerecho. Holiday, pinagbabagyo, edi last week, medyo antay man unay simsimbre ken kasi nga't meron adala tayo iti bagyo nga. So nga itata, it's another day. Mainit na umaga. Mainit na umaga ay napintas iti weather itata dito yung probinsya tayo. Expected yon nga na baraman iti tiyempo itata kasi ngathan man nga agtudtudor. So itata ado ti maubra niya. So itatay play tayo dito ASEAN by BBM and in time at amwen ken nabuyaen kada ito nga paset iti president tayo kasi nga it's apartment niya tapno maamuan met dagiti daduma para iti panaka programa iti BBM. So dati ket PD30 President Duterte kung natin nga kastaan. But now, we have the President Bongbong Marcos. So nga PBBM ti intay buyain itata. So eto yan iti full coverage yan or video tapno met amamuan tayo dagiti mapaspasamak pa iti Malacanang.
Yang mulia His Excellency President Yoon Suk Yeol, His Majesty, Excellencies, ASEAN leaders, welcome to Jakarta, President Yoon. For Indonesia, the ASEAN-Korea partnership is the partnership of the future, with the main pillars of energy transition and digital transformation. ASEAN's dependency on 78% fossil fuels must be reduced. At the same time, in 1 decade, digital economy in ASEAN is predicted to contribute $1 trillion to the regional GDP. However, energy transition and digital transformation require investments and transfer of technology at a significant amount. Therefore, collaboration and partnership is needed to materialize it. Excellencies, in addition to an economic standpoint, our future partnership can only be achieved if regional stability is maintained, if tensions and rivalries are reduced, if strategic trust is deepened, and if the habit of cooperation is intensified. This is a shared responsibility for those in the Indo-Pacific, and I appreciate the support of Korea to the ASEAN Indo-Pacific Forum. This shows a real inclusive cooperation to maintain stability and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific. That is all for me. I hereby declare the 24th ASEAN and Republic of Korea Summit officially opened. Next, I wish to invite His Excellency Yoon Suk Yeol, the President of the Republic of Korea, to deliver his opening remarks. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
President Joko Widodo, Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh, and distinguished leaders from ASEAN nations, allow me to express my sincerest gratitude to President Joko Widodo for graciously hosting the ASEAN-related summits and extending a warm welcome to us. I would also like to extend my special thanks to Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh for his outstanding contributions from Vietnam as the country coordinator. Esteemed leaders of ASEAN, at last year's meeting, I unveiled the Korea-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative, also known as KASI for short. This initiative is founded upon the Republic of Korea's unwavering support for ASEAN Centrality and the ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific, or AOIP. I am extremely proud that over the last year, the Korea-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative, KASI, has identified and advanced 8 key areas of focus, expanding the breadth and depth of our cooperation. And in the meantime, I continue to focus on strengthening trilateral cooperation among the Republic of Korea, the United States, and Japan. In August, the Trilateral Summit at Camp David opened up a new chapter for cooperation between the 3 countries. Underpinned by the 3 countries' full support for the ASEAN-led regional architecture, the ROK, US, and Japan have committed to coordinating our Indo-Pacific strategies and exploring new areas of cooperation. To this end, we have initiated the annual Trilateral Indo-Pacific Dialogue and launched the Trilateral Maritime Security Cooperation Framework, aiming to support the maritime security capabilities of Southeast Asian and Pacific Island nations.
ASEAN leaders, Korea rose from the ashes of war and has become one of the leading countries in the world in just half a century. And we hope to share this exceptional experience with the ASEAN countries and beyond by hosting the 2030 World Expo in Busan, Korea. We also want to provide a platform where we can join our heads together and explore solutions to the challenges facing mankind. Busan has a track record of having successfully hosted the ASEAN-Korea commemorative summits twice in 2014 and 2019. And I would assume that many of your excellencies here today already find Busan quite familiar. I ask for your support to Korea's endeavor in that regard so that Busan can once again contribute to building a better future in the Indo-Pacific region and for the entire humanity. Let us move forward together towards shared prosperity between ASEAN and Korea. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Before we proceed to the plenary session, which will be conducted in a closed session, I kindly request members of the press to exit the meeting room. Thank you.
President of the Republic of Indonesia, and leaders of the ASEAN-UN Summit. Please be seated.
Yang Mulia
His Majesty, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, His Majesty, ASEAN leaders. The preamble of ASEAN and the UN Charter both begin with "we, the peoples." This means our people must always be the top priority. And amidst current global challenges that are complex, wars and conflicts, crisis in energy, food crisis, financial crisis, and natural disasters, our people are deeply impacted. And to address this requires coordinated international efforts, both at the global level, which is coordinated by the United Nations, and in the Indo-Pacific region, which is coordinated by ASEAN. However, we must be honest, the effectiveness of ASEAN and the UN is often hindered by unconducive geopolitical dynamics, which fades the spirit of cooperation and the spirit of multilateralism, and is replaced by the rule of the strong. ASEAN and the UN have clear choices to be consistent in respecting international law as a basis for cooperation between nations and an inclusive paradigm of collaboration. Together, let us promote a fair development agenda for developing countries, including the right to progress and prosper. Global governance reforms must continue to be our priority to remain fit for purpose and fit for its time. Let us strengthen the spirit of international cooperation between UN and ASEAN for the people of the world. Thank you. With this, I declare the 13th ASEAN United Nations Summit open.
Selanjutnya,
Next, I invite His Excellency Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, to deliver his opening speech. Your Excellency, you may have the floor.
Your Majesty, Excellencies, Mr. Chair, President Joko Widodo, thank you for your warm welcome. And allow me to express my enormous appreciation for the wisdom and effectiveness in which you have not only leading ASEAN, but I remember the G20 last year with a fantastic contribution to improve international relations in our unfortunately divided world. Congratulations, Mr. President. And allow me also to welcome Prime Minister Xanana Guzmão with the presence of Timor-Leste for the first time as observer in ASEAN. Your Majesty, Excellencies, the ASEAN-UN Comprehensive Partnership is more important than ever. We face tests as far as the eye can see, from the climate emergency to a global cost of living crisis, to raging conflicts, to growing poverty, hunger, and inequalities. And all these challenges are aggravated by rising geopolitical tensions. There is a real risk of fragmentation, of a great fracture in world economic and financial systems, with diverging strategies on technology and artificial intelligence and conflicting security frameworks. And I commend ASEAN for your vital role in building bridges of understanding all over the world. ASEAN has played an extremely important role as a center that convenes all those that unfortunately represent the most dramatic divisions in today's world. And this series of summits is the demonstration of that fundamental convening role of ASEAN. And we need it in a world that is increasingly multipolar but requires strong multilateral institutions to go with it based on equity, solidarity, and universality. Your Majesty, Excellencies, I am grateful for your steadfast support for multilateral solutions and your contribution of over 5,000 peacekeepers from ASEAN countries. Today, allow me to focus on three critical areas. First, advancing peace through diplomacy. ASEAN's convening power, commitment to dialogue, and experience in conflict prevention are crucial pillars of stability. Today, tensions remain high, from the Korean Peninsula to the South China Sea. I'm grateful to ASEAN member states for your pursuit of dialogue and peaceful dispute resolution rooted in the respect for international law, including the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Your Majesty, Excellencies, since we gathered last year, the situation in Myanmar has further deteriorated. Brutal violence, worsening poverty, and systematic repression are crushing hopes for a return to democracy. The conflict is exacerbating existing inequalities and vulnerabilities faced by women and girls, including sexual violence, forced marriage, and human trafficking. More and more people are crossing borders in desperate search for safety and protection, and the situation is untenable. Over 1 million Rohingya remain in Bangladesh, in the world's largest refugee camps, and regrettably, the conditions for their safe, voluntary, and dignified return are not yet in sight. Much more is needed. I fully appreciate the principled approach of ASEAN through the 5-point consensus, and I urge all countries to seek a unified strategy towards Myanmar. And I also acknowledge the determined efforts of the chair of ASEAN, Indonesia, to engage all sides of the conflict in political dialogue. And my call to the military authorities of Myanmar is clear: free all detained leaders and political prisoners, open the door towards the full restoration of democratic rule. Your Majesty, Excellencies, we must also end our assault against the planet. ASEAN ranks amongst the most biodiversity-rich regions and is highly vulnerable to natural disasters. We can still limit the worst impacts and meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. I've put forward the Climate Solidarity Pact, in which all big emitters make extra efforts to cut emissions and wealthier countries support emerging economies to do so. And I have proposed an acceleration agenda that calls on developed countries to reach net zero as close as possible to 2040 and the emerging economies as close as possible to 2050. ASEAN is uniquely positioned to be a leader of an energy transition that is global, sustainable, just, inclusive, and equitable. I commend ASEAN member states that are pioneering just energy transition partnerships like Indonesia and Vietnam. And I commend all who are accelerating the phase-out of coal and jump-starting a fair and inclusive renewables revolution. But greater ambition is still needed, along with much greater support. Developed countries must finally deliver on their commitments to developing countries. Your Majesty, Excellencies, resources are also central in the third area for action, rescuing the Sustainable Development Goals. I've called for deep and structural changes to make global frameworks, including the Bretton Woods system, more representative of today's economic and political realities, and also more responsive to the needs of developing countries. Such change will not happen overnight, and I have proposed concrete steps we can take now, including a Sustainable Development Goals stimulus of $500 billion a year, to the benefit of developing countries, for them to be able to reach the Sustainable Development Goals. These and other action would catalyze SDG progress and help developing countries invest in key transitions across energy, food, digital education, health, decent jobs, and social protection. Your Majesty, Excellencies, I count on ASEAN member states to help raise global ambition in the vital months ahead. And you can always count on my wholehearted support to shape a future of peace and prosperity for the people of Southeast Asia and the world. Thank you.
Terima kasih Yang Mulia.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Before we move on to the plenary session, which will be done in a closed session, I respectfully request the media to leave the meeting room. Thank you.
All rise. The President of the Republic of Indonesia, Republic of Korea, and ASEAN leaders arrives at the venue.
Yang Mulia,
His Excellency President Yoon Suk Yeol, His Majesty, Excellencies, ASEAN leaders, welcome to Jakarta, President Yoon. For Indonesia, the ASEAN-Korea partnership is the partnership of the future, with the main pillars of energy transition and digital transformation. ASEAN's dependency on 78% fossil fuels must be reduced. At the same time, in 1 decade, digital economy in ASEAN is predicted to contribute $1 trillion to the regional GDP. However, energy transition and digital transformation require investments and transfer of technology at a significant amount. Therefore, collaboration and partnership is needed to materialize it. Excellencies, in addition to an economic standpoint, our future partnership can only be achieved if regional stability is maintained, if tensions and rivalries are reduced, if strategic trust is deepened, and if the habit of cooperation is intensified. This is a shared responsibility for those in the Indo-Pacific, and I appreciate the support of Korea to the ASEAN Indo-Pacific Forum. This shows a real inclusive cooperation to maintain stability and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific. That is all from me. I hereby declare the 24th ASEAN and Republic of Korea Summit officially opened. Next, I wish to invite His Excellency Yoon Suk Yeol, the President of the Republic of Korea, to deliver his opening remarks. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
조코위 대통령,
President Joko Widodo, Prime Minister Pham Minh Ching, and distinguished leaders from ASEAN nations, allow me to express my sincerest gratitude to President Joko Widodo, for graciously hosting the ASEAN-related summits and extending a warm welcome to us. I would also like to extend my special thanks to Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh for his outstanding contributions from Vietnam as the country coordinator. Esteemed leaders of ASEAN, at last year's meeting, I unveiled the Korea-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative, also known as CASI for short. This initiative is founded upon the Republic of Korea's unwavering support for ASEAN centrality and the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific, or AOIP. I am extremely proud that over the last year, the Korea-ASEAN Solidarity Initiative, CASI, has identified and advanced 8 key areas of focus, expanding the breadth and depth of our cooperation. And in the meantime, I continue to focus on strengthening trilateral cooperation among the Republic of Korea, the United States, and Japan. In August, the Trilateral Summit at Camp David opened up a new chapter for cooperation between the 3 countries. Underpinned by the 3 countries' full support for the ASEAN-led regional architecture, the ROK, US, and Japan have committed to coordinating our Indo-Pacific strategies and exploring new areas of cooperation. To this end, we have initiated the annual Trilateral Indo-Pacific Dialogue and launched the Trilateral Maritime Security Cooperation Framework, aiming to support the maritime security capabilities of Southeast Asian and Pacific Island nations.
ASEAN leaders, Korea rose from the ashes of war and has become one of the leading countries in the world in just half a century. And we hope to share this exceptional experience with the ASEAN countries and beyond by hosting the 2030 World Expo in Busan, Korea. We also want to provide a platform where we can join our heads together and explore solutions to the challenges facing mankind. Busan has a track record of having successfully hosted the ASEAN-Korea commemorative summits twice in 2014 and 2019. And I would assume that many of your excellencies here today already find Busan quite familiar. I ask for your support to Korea's endeavor in that regard so that Busan can once again contribute to building a better future in the Indo-Pacific region and for the entire humanity. Let us move forward together towards shared prosperity between ASEAN and Korea. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Before we proceed to the plenary session, which will be conducted in a closed session, I kindly request members of the press to exit the meeting room. Thank you.
Of Indonesia, ASEAN, and China leaders. Please be seated.
Selamat pagi.
Good morning. His Excellency Premier Li Qiang, His Majesty, Excellencies, ASEAN leaders.
Selamat datang di Jakarta.
Welcome to Jakarta, Premier Li. China is one of the 4 ASEAN dialogue partners with the status of comprehensive strategic partner. And this year marks 20 years since China's accession to the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation. We need to interpret all of this by realizing concrete cooperation that is mutually beneficial, and this concrete cooperation will only be possible when we have trust towards one another, which is, of course, needs to be built and maintained by all parties. Trust and concrete cooperation can become the positive force for regional stability and peace. That is all for me, and I hereby declare the 26th ASEAN-China Summit open.
Selanjutnya, saya mengundang
To proceed, I would like to invite His Excellency Premier Li Qiang, Prime Minister of China, to convey his opening remarks. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Your Excellency, President Joko Widodo, colleagues, it is my great pleasure to gather with you in Jakarta. I wish to thank President Joko Widodo and the Indonesian government for the meticulous preparations and thoughtful arrangements made for the meeting. I also welcome Prime Minister Sanana Gusmal of Timor-Leste to the meeting as ASEAN observer, and I look forward to in-depth exchanges with friends both old and new. In 2013, it was also in Indonesia that President Xi Jinping proposed building a closer China-ASEAN community with a shared future. Over the past 10 years, China and ASEAN have forged ahead hand in hand and contributed to each other's successes. Facing great changes unseen in a century, we have embarked on a right path, featuring long-standing good neighborliness and shared progress and prosperity. China has remained the world's second biggest economy, and ASEAN's combined GDP has become the 5th largest in the world. Our joint efforts are fully reflected in the following 4 areas. First, we have been committed to treating each other with sincerity, and our political mutual trust has grown deeper. Sincerity is the key that opens the heart, and trust is the bridge that connects the minds. No matter how the international situation evolves, China and ASEAN have maintained close exchanges and communication, respected each other's development path, and accommodated each other's major concerns. China was the very first country to establish a strategic partnership with ASEAN and took the lead to elevate the relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership in 2021. And that is a strong testament to the strategic trust between our two sides. Now China has reached important consensus separately with 6 ASEAN countries on building a community with a shared future, and we hope to do so with more countries in the future. Second, we have been committed to mutual assistance, and our good neighborly friendship has become stronger. China and ASEAN countries enjoy geographical proximity and close affinity. We have adhered to the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence and the purpose of the TAC. We seek common ground while setting aside differences, properly handle disagreements through dialogue and consultation, and consistently deepen practical cooperation in the traditional and non-traditional security fields. We have preserved peace and tranquility in East Asia in a world fraught with turbulence and change. In particular, we confronted the COVID-19 challenge by coming to each other's aid in those difficult times, and that is a reflection of our brotherly ties in face of adversity with concrete actions. Third, we are committed to mutual benefit, and our will and cooperation has been more productive. China and ASEAN see each other's development as an important opportunities, and we have kept markets open to each other. Last year, our two-way trade volume reached over 970 billion US dollars, and that is more than doubling the volume a decade ago. We have been each other's top trading partners for 3 years running. In 2021, at the special summit to commemorate the 30th anniversary of China-ASEAN dialogue relations, President Xi Jinping pledged that China will buy up to $150 billion worth of agricultural products from ASEAN in the next 5 years. Now, to date, over $55 billion worth of these products have been imported, faster than expected. We have reached a full consensus on regional connectivity, delivered a steady stream of signature outcomes in high-quality Belt and Road cooperation, and made solid progress in building the new international land-sea trade corridor. All this has brought new opportunities for both sides. Fourth, we have been committed to coordination and inclusiveness, and our common development has become more sustainable. Both Chinese and Southeast Asian cultures value harmony between man and nature. Following the philosophy of green, low-carbon, and sustainable development, we have fostered new cooperation highlights in climate action, environmental protection, energy transition, and poverty reduction. The China-ASEAN Year of Sustainable Development Cooperation was held in the past 2 consecutive years. China's Global Development Initiative, the GDI, and the ASEAN Community Vision 2025 echo and reinforce each other, and the GDI has been widely recognized and welcomed by ASEAN countries. The China-ASEAN cooperation has come a long way, and the key reason is that we both have a keen understanding about hardships. We both have a relentless pursuit of peace. We both have a strong aspiration for development, and we both take real actions to preserve regional stability. As long as we keep to the right path, no matter what storm may come, China-ASEAN cooperation will be as firm as ever and press ahead against all odds. And we each will achieve greater development and progress in the course of such cooperation. So those are my opening remarks. Thank you.
Terima kasih.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Premier Lee. Now, before we proceed to the closed plenary session, which will be carried out behind closed doors, I respectfully invite members of the press to exit the meeting room. Thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, please rise for the arrival of the President of the Republic of Indonesia and leaders of the ASEAN-Australia Summit. Please be seated.
Yang Mulia
His Excellency Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, His Majesty, Excellencies ASEAN leaders.
bagi ASEAN, Australia,
For ASEAN, Australia is more than just a neighbor. Australia is a strategic comprehensive partner and also the link to the Pacific region. On the other hand, ASEAN is also an important trading partner for Australia with a trade value that is higher than with the US and Japan. Therefore, whatever happens in the Indo-Pacific will have a major impact for Australia as well as for ASEAN. Therefore, ASEAN and Australia both have the interest, both have the responsibility to ensure that the Indo-Pacific participation in the ASEAN Indo-Pacific Forum, especially the active role of Prime Minister Albanese. Thank you, Prime Minister Albanese. And with the principle of inclusiveness this year, ASEAN will work together with the Indian Ocean Rim Association and Pacific Islands Forum, and ASEAN is also committed to continue to establish mutually beneficial cooperation with Australia. That is all from me, and I hereby declare the third ASEAN-Australia Summit open.
saya mengundang
Next, I would like to invite His Excellency Anthony Albanese, Prime Minister of Australia, to deliver his opening remarks. Excellency, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, President Widodo, for co-chairing this meeting. And I do want to congratulate Indonesia on its leadership of ASEAN this year, following on from, of course, your leadership of the G20 just last year. Thank you also to Prime Minister Sonsei Sipendon for Lao PDR's ongoing support as Australia's ASEAN country coordinator. Australia is pleased to support your preparations for the 2024 ASEAN Chair Year. ASEAN is profoundly important to Australia. We share ASEAN's ambition for economic prosperity and stability. My government is committed to growing and strengthening our ties with ASEAN. Yesterday, I launched a blueprint for Australia's economic engagement in the region over the next 2 decades. Authored by our Special Envoy for Southeast Asia, Mr. Nicholas Moore, Invested Southeast Asia Economic Strategy to 2040 sets out a practical pathway to deepen our economic engagement, complementing our significant body of work together. And that cooperation has gained significant momentum since we agreed the ASEAN-Australia Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. Our program of cooperation is about building a region that is secure and stable, that works for the people in it, and that can address complex challenges like climate change, health security, and transnational crime. In the last 12 months, through the Oz for ASEAN Futures initiative, we supported the development of the ASEAN Strategy on Carbon Neutrality adopted on Tuesday. We supported the development of the ASEAN Digital Economy Framework Agreement. We backed the updating of ASEAN's infrastructure pipeline and supported practical implementation of the ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific. Australia is committed to supporting Southeast Asia's long-term food security. Our work on this will help protect our resilience to global shocks. We're working closely to seize the opportunities of the clean energy transition. Australia looks forward to co-hosting the ASEAN-Australia high-level dialogue on climate change and energy transition with Vietnam and Laos later this year. In 2024, we will celebrate 50 years of partnership between Australia and ASEAN. To commemorate this important anniversary, it will be my great honour to welcome ASEAN leaders to Melbourne in March next year for an ASEAN-Australia Special Summit. I look forward to hearing your priorities for ASEAN-Australian cooperation today. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, before we start the closed plenary session behind closed doors, I respectfully ask all media personnel to exit the meeting room. Thank you.
Please be seated.
Baginda,
Your Majesty, Excellencies, ASEAN leaders, Vice President Kamala Harris, Southeast Asia is a region that is full of potential that is predicted by 2024, 2045 will become the center of trade and will contribute to 5.4% of world GDP. Hence, a strong partnership and sustainable between ASEAN and the US will not only benefit ASEAN, but also will benefit the US. However, this partnership can only be realized if there is a strong commitment between the two parties in maintaining peace and stability in the region. Your Excellency, ASEAN has agreed to continue its function as a locomotive of peace and stability in the region, where Indo-Pacific must become the platform for collaboration. Hence, ASEAN invites the US to be a positive force in creating a peaceful, stable, and prosperous Indo-Pacific through tangible and inclusive cooperation. With this, I declare the 11th ASEAN and the United States Summit open. Next, I invite Your Excellency Vice President Kamala Harris to deliver her opening statement. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, and congratulations on a successful year as the chair of ASEAN. It is my honor to be here in Indonesia and to be back in Southeast Asia. This is my third trip to Southeast Asia since taking office as Vice President of the United States, and my fourth to the Indo-Pacific. And in May of 2023, it was my pleasure to chair several sessions with ASEAN leaders at the historic U.S.-ASEAN Special Summit in Washington, D.C. It is good to see so many of you again. The United States has an enduring commitment to Southeast Asia and more broadly to the Indo-Pacific. We are a proud Pacific power, and the American people have a profound stake in the future of the Indo-Pacific. We share historic bonds and common values with many of the people and nations here. And our alliances and partnerships support the security and prosperity of the United States and ASEAN. For example, Mr. President, as you mentioned, the flow of commerce between Southeast Asia and the United States supports more than 600,000 American jobs. And U.S.-ASEAN economic cooperation represents a huge opportunity for growth for both of our markets. And the defense and deterrence commitments of the United States and our security presence in the Indo-Pacific help protect our homeland and ensure regional stability. It is therefore in our vital interest to promote a region that is open, interconnected, prosperous, secure, and resilient. Colleagues, ASEAN is at the center of America's commitments to the Indo-Pacific. As the United States Indo-Pacific strategy makes clear, we are committed to ASEAN centrality. And I am pleased that our collective vision for the Indo-Pacific is in strong alignment. We have a shared commitment to international rules and norms, and to our partnership on pressing national and regional issues such as the crisis in Myanmar. The United States will continue to press the regime to end the horrific violence, to release all those unjustly detained, and to reestablish Myanmar's path to inclusive democracy. And we will continue to support ASEAN's 5-point consensus. More broadly, in a demonstration of the enduring and important relationship between the United States and Southeast Asia, since President Biden and I took office, we have expanded U.S.-ASEAN ties. To that end, we have upgraded the relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership. We invested in infrastructure and the digital economy. We launched major initiatives to address the climate crisis and health security. And we expanded cultural and educational exchange programs. And today, I am pleased to announce that we will establish, through a public-private partnership, the first ever U.S.-ASEAN Center in Washington, D.C. The center will facilitate official ASEAN engagements and support further exchange between our people, businesses, and academic institutions. To further strengthen our ties, I'm also pleased that our ambassador to ASEAN, Johannes Abraham, is here in Jakarta. He has been a close advisor to President Biden and to me since we took office, and I know his leadership will help make progress on the many issues we will discuss today. Additionally, I will acknowledge and welcome the presence of Timor-Leste in this meeting. The United States will continue to support Timor-Leste in its path towards ASEAN membership. In conclusion, I believe as leaders we must address global challenges of today while also investing in a long-term vision. We must look 10, 20, 30 years out and measure our current steps against that vision. The United States and the nations of Southeast Asia share many long-term interests and priorities, as well as a long-term vision. So with that in mind, I look forward to our discussion today, and I thank you.
Terima kasih.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Next, before we begin the closed meeting session, I respectfully request the media to leave the meeting room. Thank you.
Yang Mulia,
Your Majesty, Prime Minister Modi, Your Majesty, leaders of ASEAN, I really appreciate the presence of Prime Minister Modi's amidst the G20 summit preparation. Thank you once again, Prime Minister Modi. Excellencies, ASEAN-India partnership has bring real benefits to the people, but the collaboration needs to be further optimized. This is seeing the potential of the Indian Ocean of 2.1 billion people and 1/5 of the world GDP in 2025. The potential for the cooperation needs to be further strengthened through the blue economy, food security, maritime security, and maritime power. And maritime crime needs to be countered, such as human smuggling, unregulated and unreported or IUU fishing. We need to make the sea as a sea of cooperation and not of confrontation. That needs to be maintain the stability and the peace by respecting the habit of cooperation and international law in building the regional security. This is to make the region as the epicenter of growth. This is all from me. And I hereby declare the 20th ASEAN-India Summit opened.
selanjutnya
Next, I invite Excellency Prime Minister Modi, the Prime Minister of India, to deliver his opening statement. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Your Excellency, President Joko Widodo, Your Majesty, Excellencies, Namaskar. Our partnership is entering its 4th decade. It gives me immense pleasure at this time to co-chair the India-ASEAN Summit. I express my gratitude to President Widodo for the wonderful arrangements made for this summit. And I also commend him for his able leadership of ASEAN. My heartfelt congratulations to the Prime Minister of Cambodia, His Excellency Hun Manet, on having assumed office recently. I also welcome Prime Minister of Timor-Leste, His Excellency Senana Guzmao, as an observer at this meeting. Your Majesty, Excellencies, India and ASEAN have both historical and geographical links. Our shared values, regional unity, and our shared belief in peace, prosperity, and a multipolar world also bring us together. ASEAN is a central pillar of India's Act East policy. India fully supports ASEAN centrality and the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific. ASEAN has an important place in India's Indo-Pacific initiative as well. Last year, we celebrated the India-ASEAN Friendship Year and also elevated our mutual relations to a comprehensive strategic partnership. Your Majesty, Excellencies, even in today's environment of global uncertainty, we are making continuous progress in our mutual cooperation in every sector. This bears testimony to the strength and resilience of our relations. The theme of this year's ASEAN Summit is ASEAN Matters, Epicentrum of Growth. ASEAN matters because here everyone's voice is heard, and ASEAN is the epicentrum of growth because the ASEAN region plays an important role in global development. It is the spirit of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, one earth, one family, one future, that is also the theme of India's G20 presidency. Your Majesty, Excellencies, the 21st century is the century of Asia. It is our century. For this, it is essential that we build a rules-based post-COVID world order and that we make collective efforts for the welfare of mankind. Progress in ensuring a free and open Indo-Pacific and amplifying the voice of the Global South is in our common interest. I am confident that during our discussions today, new resolutions will be made to further strengthen the future of the India-ASEAN region. India is committed to working shoulder to shoulder with country coordinator Singapore, the incoming chair Lao PDR, and with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Now, before we begin the closed session, I respectfully request all the media to leave the room. Thank you.
Sri Baginda,
His Majesty, Excellencies, East Asia Summit leaders. Welcome to the East Asia Summit. This afternoon, I just want to re-emphasize one point, that we are all sitting around this table have an equally enormous responsibility to create peace, stability, and prosperity in the region. We have a shared responsibility to not create new conflicts, to not create new tensions, to not create new wars. And at the same time, we are also responsible to ease high tensions, to soften hard conditions, to create rooms for dialogue, and to bridge existential differences. Excellencies, hard to tell how many times the words peace and stability have been uttered by every one of us. it definitely shows that essentially we acknowledge peace and stability are the main key to achieve prosperity. ASEAN is steadfast in making this region as the epicentrum of growth, and therefore ASEAN will continue to work to play a role as contributor of peace and stability. And ASEAN will really appreciate if this East Asia Summit can agree on a leader statement in its determination to continue making this region as the epicentrum of growth. This is where the international community will assess if we are leaders with the wisdom to make the world a better place for all. I ask once again to the leaders of East Asia Summit to make this forum as a forum for us to strengthen cooperation, cooperation, not sharpening rivalries. I call on all the leaders to show the wisdom, to show leadership for the success of this meeting and bring about concrete benefits for the people. And this is where the international community will assess if we are the leaders with the wisdom to make the world a better place for all. I'd like to stop there, and I hereby declare the 18th East Asia Summit open.
Sri Baginda,
His Majesty, Excellencies, East Asia Summit leaders, in line with the spirit of inclusive cooperation as part of this summit, cooperation MOU has been agreed by the ASEAN with IORA and PIF. On that note, I welcome participation of the President of Bangladesh and Prime Minister of the Cook Islands in today's East Asia Summit. And I would like to invite the guests of the chair to share their views. To begin, I would like to invite His Excellency Muhammad Sahabuddin, President of Bangladesh, as Chair of the Indian Ocean Rim Association. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Honorable President, Republic of Indonesia, Honorable Head of States and Governments and Dialogue Partners, Honorable Secretary General of ASEAN, Honorable Ministers and other heads of delegation from member states and dialogue partners, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum, and very good morning to you all. It is my distinct honor to be able to attend the 43rd ASEAN Summit and related summits. I congratulate the current ASEAN Chair, Indonesia, for commendably steering ASEAN during their tenure. I also express my heartfelt gratitude to the Chair for extending
to 27.6%. We are each other's important economic and trade partners, and our industrial and supply chains are deeply integrated. If we can continue to enhance openness and cooperation, we will surely forge an epicentrum of global growth. With third, we share common opportunities. We are each other's opportunities and can inject strong impetus into global development. The Chinese economy is now on track to realize the annual growth target of around 5%. More importantly, China is advancing high-quality development and Chinese modernization on all fronts. The Chinese economy enjoys bright prospects and will continue to generate fresh and greater opportunities for the region and the rest of the world. While we remain steadfast in seeking common ground based on the commonalities, we shall have nothing to fear about the differences, and will be able to find the right way to resolve them. Disagreements and disputes may arise between countries due to misperceptions, diverging interests, or external interferences. Whatever the cause, it is vital to face the issues squarely, remove misunderstandings, and keep the differences in check. Facing up to the problems is a prerequisite for finding solutions, whereas an ostrich policy would only make things worse. The most effective way to clear up misunderstandings is to strengthen exchanges and increase mutual understanding and trust through sincere communication. To keep differences under control, what is essential now is to oppose picking sides, oppose bloc confrontation, and oppose a new Cold War, and to ensure that disagreements and disputes among countries are properly handled. Our meeting and discussion here are actually a concrete action in seeking common ground and resolving differences. We need to bear in mind the larger interest of peace and development in Asia, approach the commonalities and differences between countries in the right way, and make the foundation of APD cooperation even stronger. We should work in concert to meet various types of risks and challenges, promote development, prosperity, and stability of our region, and build an Asian community with a shared future. That concludes my opening remarks. Thank you.
Terima kasih.
Thank you, Excellency. Next, before we begin the closed plenary session, I respectfully ask the media personnel to vacate the meeting room. Thank you.
So, nangyagan tayo matikaday nga programa niya iti BBM. So, hopefully nga, da matiti na sursuro tayo itatan, iti programa tayo silnag iti pagtainga. So, ito nabigat, ado panen iti pabuya tayon, ado man iti topic tayon, hantay nga agbeberas, naganan ito nabigat, ipabuya tayo magdatoy balik eskwela program ni Vice Governor Ryan C. So, but, today is another day, kunak manen, and hopefully, aduman itinaadal tayo kada ito yung programa sila nagtipagtainga. So, kadwa tayo technical side tayo na Ms. Cara Molina, and it's Mir Kapid, Ramanuel Tabay. Have a blessed day, everyone.
No serbisyo analaka nga catering ti masapulyo, adda iti Caril's Garden Catering Services ang masarakan di Mabini Street, Barangay Rizal, Kabugaw, Ilocos Sur. Adu pa iti agkakaimas nga makan ti inkay pagpilian. Ken saan lang kadayta, na ornos ti serbisyo da, napintas iti set up da. Ken saan yon a problema no kasapulan nyo iti venue. Oray anyaman nga okasyon ket mabaling nga rambakan kas iti kasar, birthday, anniversary, reunions, meeting, ken dumapay. Caril's Garden and Catering Services ti kapintasan ken kalakaan. Nadaras pay akasarita ti akin bagi ani